Stay with us until the end, because the most shocking reason why Russian soldiers are strapping wood to tanks is something you won't want to miss. Ukraine is laughing, but not because Russian soldiers are dying in droves from outdated Soviet tactics. No, what's provoking this bitter laughter is the bizarre, almost absurd battlefield improvisation those soldiers are resorting to as they face Ukraine's relentless drone warfare. In a desperate move, Russian troops are now shielding their tanks, artillery, and armored vehicles with, on July 18th, United 24 reported that Russian forces had begun cladding their equipment with wooden boards and logs, hoping this crude solution would shield them from Ukraine's lethal drones. The images, published by Defense Blog, speak for themselves. Wooden pallets and rough logs haphazardly strapped to military hardware, from outdated howitzers to ancient personnel carriers. There's no complex engineering here, just stacks of scrap wood attached wherever they fit. And while this might provide marginal protection against shrapnel or small FPV drones, modern loitering munitions and anti-tank weapons will cut through it like butter. In fact, this desperate tactic reveals a deeper truth. Russia is increasingly unable to deploy properly armored systems. It's a visual metaphor for a crumbling war machine. It's not even a new trick. Ukrainian officials say Russia has tried this before. Logs lashed onto vehicles during earlier stages of the war, hoping to reinforce platforms never designed to survive modern combat. Even in March 2022, reports from TWZ showed Russia relying on wood to protect radiators, essentially trying to prevent vehicles from overheating in ambushes. But wood, as everyone knows, burns. A Molotov cocktail or an incendiary round turns that armor into kindling. Still, the Russian military keeps trying. In January 2023, The Telegraph reported another innovation: loading fuel trucks with logs, not to protect them but to disguise them. The idea was that Ukrainian drones would mistake them for something else and pass over. But this illusion didn't work. The very next image showed one of these camouflage trucks, burnt, destroyed, targeted, and exposed. All of this seems to suggest a military that is spiraling backwards, recycling World War II era ideas in a 21st century war. In fact, TWZ highlighted a US tank on Iwo Jima in 1945 covered in wooden slats. And yet, somehow, Russia thinks that 80-year-old battlefield tricks are going to outmatch modern precision drones. So why wood? United 24 suggests the answer begins with the equipment itself. Russia is dusting off vehicles like the MTLB, a 1960s-era personnel carrier that was already lightly armored in its prime and is now laughably obsolete. Ukrainian analysts point out that some of this Soviet-era junk can't even resist shrapnel, let alone explosive anti-tank weapons. Slapping logs onto these metal relics is like putting a band-aid on a tank. And still, the madness continues. Why? Because in one isolated case, it sort of worked. Former Forbes reporter David Axe wrote about a Russian unit that welded together a primitive armored assault vehicle using a tank, logs, sheet metal, and sheer desperation. It even survived a few drone hits during an assault on Velika Novosilka. But then artillery wiped it out, and unlike most vehicles, that one had composite protection, metal, bricks, and logs, not just scrap wood. Most Russian vehicles, however, are stuck with plain wood, and that's simply not working. Still, they try, because Ukraine's drones keep coming. United 24 embedded with Ukraine's 92nd Assault Brigade earlier this year and witnessed firsthand how FPV drones, costing just a few $100s, can cripple million-dollar Russian vehicles. These drones knock out wheels, rip through tracks, and disable equipment with surgical precision. Ukraine knows the vulnerabilities. After all, much of Russia's current arsenal used to belong to Ukraine back in the Soviet days. It's fighting with familiar hardware and dismantling it with ruthless efficiency. And now, Ukraine's drone production is exploding. As of July 17th, The Independent reported that Ukraine has built 10-kilometer wide kill zones filled with FPV drones. Thousands of them. Russia can't keep up. With production goals of over 4.5 million drones by the end of 2025, and even more if international partners contribute, Ukraine is set to flood the battlefield. President Zelensky said in June that Ukraine could manufacture up to 8 million drones per year. If funded, it becomes a drone tsunami. Russia's counter? Wood. It would be funny if it weren't so tragic. Russia is fielding decrepit vehicles and hoping wood will keep them alive. And the numbers show why they're so desperate. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, Russia has lost over 11,000 tanks, more than 23,000 armored vehicles, and 30,000 artillery systems. On July 21st alone, 1 tank, 7 armored vehicles, and 43 artillery pieces destroyed. So what does Putin do? He digs deeper into Soviet storage, pulling out rusting tanks that are barely functional, wraps them in wood, and sends them into battle. It's a vicious cycle. Modern gear is destroyed, replaced with older gear. That gear is destroyed, replaced with even older gear. And the condition of what remains. In February, the International Institute for Strategic Studies reported that most of Russia's remaining tanks in storage are too degraded to refurbish. At current loss rates, they estimate Russia will be unable to maintain effective offensive operations beyond early 2026. Others believe Russia will run out of tanks altogether by the end of 2025. Which brings us to the final and perhaps saddest reason why Russian soldiers are wrapping their tanks in lumber. It's psychological. By late June, Russia had surpassed 1 million casualties in Ukraine, dead, wounded, or captured. That's 1 million people sacrificed in a war that was supposed to last a few days. Meanwhile, back in Russia, grieving mothers were receiving meat grinders as gifts for International Women's Day, an unthinkably cruel metaphor for the human cost of Putin's war. For soldiers on the front, knowing they're viewed as cannon fodder, any illusion of protection, even a few slabs of plywood, might offer a shred of comfort. In this context, wood isn't armor, it's a placebo, a way to trick themselves into believing they might survive the next drone strike. It's the last thread of hope in a war they were never equipped to win. So yes, Russia is using wood, because it has no other option. And the cruelest irony? Soon, there may be more wood than vehicles left to protect. Watch our video to understand why wood on Russian tanks isn't just a tactical failure. It's a symbol of a collapsing army. And don't forget to subscribe to Bawler for more coverage of Russia's last-ditch efforts in the war against